Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm excited to welcome you to this program. We were able to have some wonderful speakers share their history and memories and forward-thinking plans for the Irondequoit Public Library tonight. Our first speaker will be Greg Merrick, who is our IPL, who is the Irondequoit town historian, and then Linda Luby, who is one of our staff members from the Monroe branch, which is where I started working on Easter Road, will be speaking, and then Greg Benoit, our library director, will round out the evening talking about the future of this library. Thank you so very much for starting us off, and
all right,
turn it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Well, good evening. Like I was introduced, I am the Irondequoit historian. I was asked to take that position about a little over a year ago, so I'm giving it a try, and I'm finding out it's a lot of work, but it's a lot of fun. So this is the 75th anniversary of the Irondequoit Library. In fact, this month, it began 75 years ago. So we'll find that in my PowerPoint. So what I did is I tried to put a little bit of history in a PowerPoint presentation that has a lot of facts, and I backed them up because some of the dates you'll read in some of the materials are not what we have over on the table, but those are some of the certificates that the library is received or was approved for to become a library, and Greg Benoit put those out for us to view. But when you're reading some of the publications, and I was just talking with Greg about that, is you got to be careful on some of the dates. And as I'm going through here, I'm going to try and identify where there's some other publications out there that you would read and get a different date. But I checked them out because I didn't find some of the dates to be very accurate. And so this PowerPoint has the most accurate dates that I could verify through other sources, newspaper articles, or documents that were signed on certain dates. So the Irondequoit Public Library is a library, and I think first of all you need to know in basic terms what is a library. So it's a place in which the literary, musical, artistic, and reference materials, books, manuscripts, recordings, or films are kept for the use but not for sale. And then a collection of such materials. Well, what does that mean, a collection of such materials? That's libraries for private institutions that kept libraries. It still was for the company or the business or the organization, but it wasn't for sale. Now it says not for sale, and you're going to say, well, the library has book sales. That's not their business. They have book sales because they have a lot of donated books, or they have a lot of extra books, and they do that as a fundraising. What a great fundraiser, right? Library and books. But their purpose is not to be mercantile and selling the books. Their purpose is to be a business and offering the books to be loaned or any of the other manuscripts. Libraries have been around for centuries. Before the advent of the modern technology, libraries were primarily a place for books, documents, and other written materials that were stored for various use by private or religious organizations. And you're going to find that that was more for religious organizations than private. Now, today, you might find libraries private, the law libraries and the Congress Library and a few of those. But when libraries got started, there was more for religious purposes. The first library to be established in America was in 1636 when the Great and General Court of Massachusetts Bay Colony, and the Massachusetts Bay Colony was where a lot of the British were coming in to the United States, and it was in the Boston area, Charles River and the Bay Area over there. And it established a school of higher education in Cambridge, which at that time was Newton, and Newton was from 1630 to 1638. And it was a Puritan community. And they called this college New College. In 1638, the Puritan clergyman, John Harvard, passed, and he willed half of his estate and a collection of 400 books consisting mostly of religious and theological topics, to the new college. And this established the first public library. On March 13th, 1639, the college was renamed Harvard College after its benefactor, John Harvard, and later became the Harvard University. John Harvard died at 30. He was a young man, and he was a pastor in the Puritan religion. And his books mostly were to try and, they were trying to develop a community in America, which wasn't America then, it was the new world. And they were trying to develop a Puritan community where they were going to teach people to live the pure life and break away from England. Not that England was bad. So now for Irondequoit's first 108 years, residents of the town didn't have a public library. The only public schools had small libraries, and they were only open during school season, and they were only open mostly for students. Public couldn't go into a school. Irondequoit residents would visit the Rochester Public Library, and it was a family trip typically. It would be on a Saturday morning typically, and they would take the bus, or you notice the family car, because families only had one car back in the day. If you had a car, you had one car. It's not like today you go by and you see 6 cars in the driveway and you know there's 6 people living there. So in 1946, Pauline Evans began voicing her concerns about the Irondequoit's need for a library of its own. Evans she held meetings in her home at various interested parties. And in 1947, she established the Irondequoit Library Association. And that was a group of volunteers that were interested in establishing an Irondequoit library. So, Evans also solicited the assistance of many outside organizations, including the director of the Rochester Public Library, library development offices of the State Education Department in Albany, and the Board of Regents. All 3 of these organizations have a lot of power, and I guess they guide where the library directions and their how they're built out and provide their services, which I think maybe Greg will explain a little bit more later. Operational, Greg Verman. So in 1947, the school board of the old District Number 3, which later became the West Irondequoit School District, agreed to allow the group of volunteers to keep a school library open during the summer on an experimental trial. On June 30th, 1947, the Irondequoit Summer Library opened. It was only open for 2 months. During the 2 months that the library was open, it had 535 borrowers and a collection of 4,500 books. And the library became so busy that they ended up putting a fence around it, and high school girls volunteered to watch babies and toddlers while the families were inside obtaining material. So here's a picture of that library. And the library was established as a temporary building, and this was the school library, was established as a temporary building that located behind the Irondequoit High School that was on the corner of Titus Avenue and Cooper Road. Volunteers staffed the library, which was open during the summer, and children's books were borrowed from the Seneca, Dake, and Rogers schools, as well as a lot of books were donated from many people in the community. I'm going to try something here, maybe I won't. I won't, because I'll mess it up. But you see here, it says Irondequoit Summer Library. That was actually the school library. Here's what the school looked like. And over here is an aerial picture. And this was the library building here. And this is what it looked like from the north looking south. This is from the west looking a little bit to the east. And then this one here would be from the east looking northwest. Almost simultaneously, the opening of a library in West Irondequoit, Mrs. Norman Graham was instrumental in opening a library branch in Seabreeze. It was a small room that was obtained from a new It was a small room obtained for the new library branch in the building that housed the Sea Breeze Water Commissioner's office, and that was at 4441 Culver Road. I'm not even sure that that's still there. Sea Breeze Water District still has a commissioner, and they have properties that are now on Seneca Road at 590 by the water tower. The library began with only 31 books on its shelf, and it was a significantly lower amount than what the Western Irondequoit Library opened. This was a quote that Maud West, town historian, and she was also the author of the Irondequoit story. And she wrote in her book, she says, by January of 1948, a provisional charter had been granted by the Board of Regents of the state of New York. In a relatively short time, all the branches were registered, indicating that they met the standards set up by the State Library in Albany. Those were those. You know what? That's something that I noticed. She said that was fast. I was so impressed when I was looking at the information here because government used to work like, you know, all you're going to see here in about 5 years, we've only maybe relocated a few times in the time since then. But so a temporary charter was presented to George F. Hilberg. He was the president of the Irondequoit Library Association. I don't know if we have a copy of that temporary charter, but we do have copies of some of the charters that the library has received as it was growing and moving, and they're over on the table. So after the presentation, feel free to go look at it. In the early years of the library's existence, Mrs. Marsden Tuthill was instrumental in recruiting about 85 volunteers to work in both libraries, and it kept the libraries open for 6 afternoons, 5 evenings, and 1 morning each week, all volunteer. The Irondequoit Library Association began searching permanent location and looked into many area properties for establishing this goal. They wanted to bring it out of these temporary buildings and have a building of their own, or have a bigger room rather than sharing it with the school or with the water commissioner. And one of the buildings that they looked at was the Grange, but it was going to cost too much money to put the light, heat, and stuff that they needed to put a library in there. We know the Grange today is the House of Guitars. I did that. Cub Scouts were solicited, and they offered their services in collecting used books and even raising money to buy new books. I thought that was kind of neat that a lot of youth groups were also involved. The high school girls were volunteering their babysitting. The Cub Scouts were helping to raise money or gather up books. And it was really a community event. In July of 1948, an experimental library was opened in the Laurelton School. The Laurelton School then and now, the building sits at 500 Hallandale Road, the old Laurelton School. At the same time that was happening, and this was being opened during the summer, because school was in session in the school year, so they allowed this during the summer. So the Laurelton Presbyterian Church, which is on Empire Boulevard and Hallandale Road, they offered a 10 by 14 foot room in their basement to house the library for a Laurelton branch. So with the help of volunteers preparing the church basement, the Laurelton branch library was moved to the Presbyterian Church and opened in November 1948. So we went from July to November and we located the library in a new facility. That's actually a picture of the room in the basement of the Laurelton Presbyterian Church. All the donated branches in the Irondequoit Library were free, including their heat and lighting. So the church paid for it, the water authority paid for it, and the school district paid the bills and didn't charge the library systems to be in those buildings. That was a plus. The Library Association raised money for telephone supplies, postage by charging membership dues. And they had fundraising that included, I thought this was kind of neat, cake sales, Christmas card sales, rummage sales, and penny drives by school-aged children. I'm guessing a penny drive is where you brought loose change and left in a container at school, and at the end of the week, they collected it up. I'm guessing that only because I know other loose change drives that are operated that way. In 1952, the Monroe County Board of Supervisors approved the establishment of the Monroe County Library System. That was petitioned and they approved it. Now, the Monroe County Board of Supervisors used to be the legislative governing body. So I wanted to make sure you understood this, that in the mid-1960s, the Supreme Court of the United States handed down an important decision that established a one-man, one-vote principle. And based on that historic action, in 1967, the 29-member Monroe County legislature became the chief's lawmaking body, and it replaced the 43-member Board of Supervisors, which had been in existence for 145 years. You still can have that operation. Ontario County, and there's some other smaller counties around this area that operate off a Board of Supervisors. And those are the leaders of each of the municipalities that serve as the legislative body for the county. Ontario County, I know, has that still. In June of 1952, the New York State Board of Regents chartered the Monroe County Library System, an association of independent public libraries that work together to improve the library services of residents in Monroe County. Membership in the Monroe County Library System began with 16 towns, 2 villages, the school district, and the city of Rochester. Member libraries remain governed by their independent board of trustees and funded by their local taxes. The Irondequoit Library proudly served on the Monroe County Library System as one of the original 16 towns. Monroe County Library System currently has 11-member board of trustees and are appointed by the Monroe County Legislature, one from the Board of Supervisors, the county legislature. With the creation of the Monroe County Library System, participating libraries were able to share their materials. This made it possible for the Irondequoit Library to obtain books or other materials from participating libraries throughout Monroe County. If you couldn't find it in the Irondequoit Library, but it was in the Rundell Library or in Scottsville, you could order it and they would have it brought here and you could pick it up at the Irondequoit Library. You didn't have to go all over. In 1950, the Irondequoit High School built its new school building on Cooper Road, north on Cooper Road from the current location, 1950s current location. And the building sat empty for a little while. How many people know what happened to that building? It burned. So it was in the early 50s, the building burned, it was torn down, and in 1954, 55, the Lincoln Rochester Trust Bank at 621 Titus Avenue replaced the old school building, and they offered Irondequoit a room in the basement for its library association. On September 27, 1955, the opening dedication of the new library branch was held at the Lincoln Rochester Trust Bank. The ceremony was attended by over 150 volunteers, which I'm guessing in 1955 is significant, probably would be even today. And the guests included Mrs. Frank Gannett. He was the publisher. He was actually alive at this time. He died in 57, but he was ill, and so his wife represented him. Dr. Charles Gosnell of the State Library and a Mr. Harold Hacker, the director of the Rochester and Monroe County Library Systems. They were in attendance at this dedication. In 1955, Irondequoit now had 4 libraries. There was the Lincoln Rochester Trust Bank, Cooper and Titus, the Water Commissioner's Office at 4441 Culver Road in Seabreeze, the Laurelton Church, Empire and Hellendale at the Laurelton Presbyterian, and Ridgewood, which was a school where Wegmans currently is up on Ridge Road East. There was a school there, Ridgewood Middle School, and they also allowed their libraries to be open during the summer. In 1956, the Irondequoit Library received a certificate of award for 10 years of continuous library service, and that was handed to them at the New York State Fair. I guess I didn't say that there, but that's what that picture of the New York State Fair opening means. That's where they went to receive it. On May of 1957, the library branch was opened in a new B. Foreman Company store located in the Culver Ridge Plaza. B. Foreman Company provided 600 square feet of space and served as the Irondequoit free of charge for 6 years. Upon opening, the other branches in East Irondequoit consolidated and went over to the B. Foreman. In 1958, Helen McGraw became Irondequoit's first library director. During her first 2 years, she worked diligently on plans for a new library and presented the plans to the Irondequoit Town Board in 1961. On April 17th, 1961, the taxpayers approved the referendum of building 2 libraries, one in East and one in the West Irondequoit. Okay. The town board applied for the New York State Board of Regents for a new chapter to establish a public library. Went from the Irondequoit Library now to the Irondequoit Public Library. Maybe Greg can answer why that is or what the differences are. I don't know. But in December of 1962, the Library Association Board, remember that was the volunteer group, met for its last time and the volunteer residence group was dissolved. The new library board was established and took control of the Irondequoit Public Library. I indicated on the last slide, I'll go back to it, that on April, it was a town board action to appoint the library board. The library board is an independent board that's elected not by the town board, but am I right?
It's appointed by the town board.
Okay.
Some libraries have elected boards.
Okay. But some boards that change, the town board appoints their first board members. And then after that, however that the charter was set up is how the board is replaced. For an example, on this one here, they were 5-year terms. So when the dissolving of the Irondequoit Library Association, the town board appointed the first library board. They appointed Chairman Bernard Jameson for 1-year term, Paul Vettman for 5-year term, the Reverend Harold Esses for 4-year term. The treasurer was Herbert Ryan. He had a 3-year term, and Harold Odell had a 2-year term. However, this library board is set up, and Greg knows, these are how the terms run. And so at the end of these terms that were established by the board back in 1961, their replacements, whether they were reelected or reappointed or a new person was put in that position, would have been on those terms. So you never had a turnover of the board unless there was somebody that was resigned and you had 2 openings maybe in one time. But when a person would be appointed to fill a vacancy from a resignation or a death, that would only be for the term that that person they're replacing expired. So on Sunday, October 27th, 1963, town of Irondequoit dedicated and welcomed 2 beautiful new library buildings at 45 Cooper Road, the West Branch, and 2180 East Ridge Road, the East Branch. And that's what they were called, the East and West Irondequoit. Well, we started getting to know them as the Helen McGraw and the Pauline Evans Library. Pauline Evans, remember, she was instrumental in getting the library started, and she was over on the west side. And Helen McGraw was the first library director, and the library from the east side was named after her. I don't know when that happened. These are just some pictures of what it used to look like. When that event took place for the grand opening, the Irondequoit Press published, this is the cover page, but it was an 8-page special newspaper. A lot of it was filled with a little bit of interesting facts about the history of the library, and a lot of it was filled by politicians congratulating Irondequoit on the achievements of 2 libraries, and vote for me. In 1975, and that was 12 years after the opening of the 2 library buildings, Helen C. McGraw reported that both libraries were inadequate in keeping up with the thousands of books, non-book materials, and the equipment of today. Reports showed that the Irondequoit Public Library buildings were already below state and national library standards upon their opening in 1963. And she was using that emphasis to try and get, this is 12 years after they opened, to try and can keep that momentum going, get a new library. So in the spring of 2013, the board resolution was approved for a new central community library to replace the two outdated buildings. This approval came with a commitment to seek much public input as possible for the design, the function, the construction of this new library, truly making the public's public library. And if anybody can remember, that was happening. There were public hearings and public inputs and everything they did, and they got all kinds of information from the public and from other libraries, and that went into the design of this building. So 40 years after Helen McGraw reported the inaccuracies of the current library building, the Irondequoit again welcomed and dedicated a new library building on September 9th of 2015. Located at 1290 Titus Avenue, this new building was more central to Irondequoit and replaced the two existing buildings. That's what it looks like from Titus Avenue, and it's more central in the town. It's on the town hall campus. Yep. So that brings you up to today. That's historically the library, operationally, and for the future. Let me introduce Greg Benoit for our library director, and
All right, I'll step up in just a second. And do a quick change on the computers. While I'm doing this, I just want to introduce Linda Luby, who will be speaking briefly before me about her experiences working at the Irondequoit Library. Linda is a retired staff member, and I think Amy gave her the most fitting introduction. Right.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. A lot of people I know are library patrons for many years. I was asked to speak to you tonight regarding some of the changes I personally experienced while I was working at the Irondequoit Public Library. I started January 9th, 1989 as a library assistant. And over the next 30 years, I saw so many changes, but there were two that were especially important. And one of them was when we got computers. So we first went live with our computers in March of 1990. So I was at the library just a little over a year before that happened. Prior to the computers, we had card catalogs. So how many of you remember the old card catalogs? Yes, they were great. So after we got the computers, we kept the card catalog for a while, just as a backup, because it used to crash at first. And when we had the card catalogs, we had to file cards by author, title, subject. And I sometimes helped with this on mornings before we opened. And another thing that we had back then was a record act. That was a little machine. It was made by Kodak. I believe that's probably why it ended in DAK, like Kodak. And that used microfilm. So what we had to do when we checked out materials at the circulation desk, we had to have 3 items and take a little picture of them. The 3 items were a library card, a paper typed library card with the patron's name and address, and a book card, which had the title of the book. And the third item was an IBM card, which had a number on it. It also had a due date. And it had, instead of having a specific due date, it would say the first, second, third, or fourth Friday of the month, whatever month it was. So Fridays were usually busy days, but when they did it that way, we were able to reuse the cards. And what would happen would be that people would return their items, we would remove the cards, send them down to the central library, downtown. And they would sort them by number and send a list back to us of the missing numbers. The clerk would then have to check the number against the microfilm for the patrons, for the item, the title of the item, the patron's name and address, type up an overdue notice and mail it to the patron. Yes. Things have changed a lot.
That whole system is automated. There's like not even a single person in charge of that now.
It's just amazing how much things have changed. So the second event that to me was really huge was the new library building. And that making all the decisions about the building and what would be best for the patrons. And as Greg mentioned, that the community was involved, all the staff was involved, everybody was trying to come up with the best ideas, what would be best for the library patrons. And some people wondered, well, do we really need a new library? And if you really spend any time in the libraries, or if you worked in the libraries, you realize there were a lot of drawbacks, not to criticize the library. I love the staff, I love the patrons. I did not like the old buildings. One of the biggest problems we have are our leaky roofs. And I don't know if how many people were aware of this, but every year we had the roofs would leak. And we had black and white composition books. I don't know if anybody remembers those old little notebooks, but we had at least 4 of them detailing dates and locations of library leaks. I remember after we got the computers, even that we draped shower curtains over the computers and some of the materials to try to protect them. We even had a large plastic trash can to collect water from the leaking roof up at the circulation desk. And we also had issues with our front doors. We had 2 front doors, one was supposed to be in, one was supposed to be out. But the problem was that the wind would catch the doors, it would be flung open and it wouldn't close, the patron would try to force it closed, and we had to have those doors repaired frequently. Our book drop was not a drive-up book drop as we have now. It was one where you had to get out of the car, walk up, put them in a little slot, and they would fall into a closet. And the problem with the closet was after the circulation, which library, the Irondequoit Public Library always had great circulation. So once the circulation increased so much, the returns would fill up the closet and get jammed. So people couldn't put the books in there. So they started placing them outside the book drop on the ground in a little pile on the cement. Well, there was cement there. So that was a problem. Then eventually we removed the closet so there would be more space and they would fall into the floor. The only problem with that was we had to make sure everything was picked up and we had to lock the book drop when we opened. So when I would unlock the doors, I would go out, check for any little piles. Well, there really weren't by then, but then unlock the book drop. So people had to bring their items into the library, not just put them in the book drop. We also, each branch had a meeting room in the basement, but people were clamoring for more meeting rooms, especially tutors who wanted to meet with their students in some privacy because they had the tables where they would meet, but other people's staff and the public would be walking by and talking, and it would be disruptive and sometimes embarrassing. So there was a need for meeting. That was just one example of need for meeting rooms. And one of the main problems was the lack of space. So a lot of the librarians were complaining because they always had to get rid of materials. When they would get something new, they'd have to get rid of something old. There wasn't space to add all these new wonderful materials that everybody wanted. So I'm saying this not to complain because we did the best with what we had, but just to show how great a need there was for a new library building. So I was ecstatic at the prospect of a new state-of-the-art library. I was so happy to be here for that. So that's why I just gave you some background of the old building, the new building. And I worked, a lot of times I scheduled myself at the circulation or the information desk. So I would see people coming in. It was so rewarding to see the looks on their faces and their expressions from children to adults, how thrilled they were with this beautiful new library. Then it was just wonderful. It was a very exciting time to work for the library. And you probably all know, but a lot of the library features now include the drive-up book drop, many popular meeting rooms, bookstore, the public area, public water stations and bathrooms on both floors, and automatic doors, which is great for patrons carrying an armloads of books or people with canes, wheelchairs, walkers, and strollers. And I was very fortunate to have worked at the library during these exciting times and changes and to have seen how much, everything improved.
All right, thank you, Linda. And thank you, Greg. I can't believe how thorough and well-researched your presentation was. I'm really impressed, and I can tell that, Linda, you have a tremendous amount of pride in your job here at the Irondequoit Library, and I loved hearing you reminisce about the program, or about your time here at Irondequoit. Okay. Just have to do one more technical thing.
Yeah, that's fine. I remember two cents. Yeah. I was so white since. I'm since my children and 10 for adults. I said there were 35 cents. That was over 2 years ago.
Okay, I apologize for. Okay, I'm having a little trouble with my notes, so I apologize for how we're going to be viewing this today. I don't have a way of getting my notes on the screen without you guys having a little preview of them. So bear with me. Okay, so I usually like to start out when I speak about the Irondequoit Library with our statistics and just some figures to kind of give you a high-level view of what our library looks like. And I highlighted these figures because I'd like to contrast them with some of the figures that you presented in yours. We currently have over 100,000 books available for you guys to choose from. That's a far cry from the 4,500 that we started with. We also have over 1 million ebooks that you can choose from on our various platforms. We have a platform called Overdrive and a platform called Hoopla, which are very popular and help keep us current with the changing trends in technology. You can also see how the library is used. We had 123,000 visits in 2021. And I think for most people who think of the library, they think of us as a building full of books. And that's true, we are a building full of books. But clearly, by the numbers, it's more accurate to say that we're a building full of people. Each one of those people that comes into this library has a story about how they use the library and about how the library has impacted their life. And there are more stories in the people who walk through the building than there are in the books that we have on our shelves. And so I wanted to just highlight some of those stories for all of you today so that we can compare and contrast how things are the same and how things are different from where we started. So of course, we're talking about people, so inevitably we're going to be talking about the connections that people make. And this is just a high-level overview of some of the work that we've done and some of the work that the public has done using the library. And it's all about making connections. So I started this job on January 2nd, 2020, and I had a nice 2-month orientation for what I thought life was going to be like in working at the Irondequoit Library. Of course, March 16th, all of our lives changed in a way that they haven't changed back fully from. And along with those changes came unprecedented needs within the community. The library has pivoted its resources and its effort to help support meeting some of these needs, both internally as a library and also as a partner to some of the organizations that you see here. Throughout the last 2 years, the library has served as an important community partner and a drop-off location for a pet supply drive for the Pet Adoption Network. We also served as a drop-off location for supplies for Willow Domestic Violence Center. They were selected as a partner because we read reports about how domestic violence was increasing during the lockdown portion of the pandemic, and we all felt very motivated to do something about that. 2 exchange students here in Irondequoit studying at Irondequoit High School coordinated a donation drive for St. Mary's Refugee Outreach Center. And you can see both of them right here. We were also a drop-off location for groceries to be distributed in the neighborhood in Buffalo that was impacted by the Tops shooting. Lastly, we also started our own service project. It's all donation driven, called All in Good Health. This was spearheaded by Emily Baker, our teen librarian. And these are personal care items, toiletries and cosmetics that are available for free in our teen room. They're specifically targeted towards teens who might be from families that are struggling economically. Along with the pandemic and the changes to our economy, so too were changes to library services. We've launched a number of services over the last few years that we're very proud of, and we think will become legacy services that people will continue to use into the future long after our current state of affairs change. I think probably the most visible one would be our curbside pickup service, which we have available and have continued throughout the pandemic. We've also revamped our Teen Tech Tutors program, where folks in the community can get free technical support from teenagers in a volunteer capacity. We also have a new partnership with Literacy Rochester to offer ESOL classes here at the library. We've also had a few opportunities, and some of you folks here may have participated in a few of these programs. We have a tremendous capacity now to reach people using apps like Zoom and Facebook Live. They provide us with an opportunity to take a library program like the one that you're all participating in tonight and make it available to potentially anyone on the internet. So we have a completely online book discussion group. It does not involve any physical books. They download the book to their computer or their tablet, and then they participate in an online discussion using Zoom. That's our Hoopla Huddle group. We also have a genealogy group that has met for some years here at the library. However, it took on a new life when the pandemic started. The pandemic certainly introduced a lot of challenges in getting people to come to the library, getting people to feel safe, getting people to feel safe gathering in close proximity. And the genealogy group was kind of had the opposite experience. We would get 20, 30 people coming to an in-person meeting pre-pandemic. And we found once we started live streaming these programs, we would get 75 to 100 people coming online. Now these programs are our flagship hybrid program occurring once a month, where roughly half of the people watch in person and the other half watch from home. It's amazing because we're able to bring in speakers from other states without having to pay for them to fly in. We also have people joining us, former Irondequoit residents, former Rochester residents who have moved away, and hobbyists who are scouring the web for new opportunities to learn about genealogy. It's not uncommon to have people join us from the other side of the country. We've even had people join from South Korea, our own little genealogy program. So in spite of the challenges of the pandemic, it certainly served as a catalyst for a lot of change that I think people really have enjoyed. Probably the service that I think we're most popular of is our Wi-Fi mobile hotspot lending program. We sprung into action early in the pandemic and secured a large number of mobile hotspots that were made available to people who were stuck at home. They were particularly valuable to students studying at Irondequoit, both of the Irondequoit high schools and Bishop Kearney. We were able to loan our hotspots to 200 students, most of whom had no internet connection at home. There were many attempts at getting internet access to students at home, but ultimately the only thing that came through for them was the library. And we're just so proud that we were able to keep those students up to date on their studies using the library-owned hotspots. So along with some specific and intense community needs that have kind of emerged over the last few years, we've also responded to individual needs. Every day we help hundreds of people in the computer lab and at our checkout desk and our information desks throughout the library. And through those interactions, we get a sense for the changing needs of the individuals in the community. And lo and behold, when the pandemic started and the economy collapsed and all of our children had to do school from home, people became really concerned about their health and their finances and their children's schooling. And I have to give Amy Henderson a lot of credit here because she coordinated and planned many of these programs. We identified programs that would meet those needs in a class setting, and we launched those in online classes. Some of these were done in person when available, but we found that we became a trusted resource for health and financial information at a time where I think people were very skeptical of the health and financial information that they were getting through television and the web. Another major issue that the library has taken up is inclusion, diversity, and accessibility. The library has formed a partnership with a nonprofit organization called Rochester Accessible Adventures. They're a nonprofit based out of Irondequoit who has a lot of experience helping recreation centers adapt their services so that they can be used by people with physical and developmental disabilities. We are one of the first libraries that they have worked with, and they're helping us in a similar capacity adapt our services and operations so that people with developmental and physical disabilities can have an easier time accessing our services and in general just have a better experience coming to the library. We've also made a renewed effort to have more diverse representation in some of our book discussion groups and programmatic offerings. And this can be done in having special displays for commemorative months like Black History Month. We also coordinated a panel discussion hosted and moderated by Alexis Arnold from 13 WAM that looked at African-American health outcomes during the COVID pandemic. We've also had a few interesting one-off programs, a travelogue with someone who specializes in travel for people with disabilities, and then an author visit from probably one of the most famous authors to come from Rochester, Linda Sue Park, also one of the most famous contemporary Asian American authors. We did a lot of work, but we did also have fun. The Irondequoit Library is really proud to offer a service where folks who have little free libraries in their yards and in their communities, they can come contact us and we can help stock their library with books if they're running low. Those are from books that were donated to the library, of course. We also had a very fun cat meet and greet, which was an adoption event, but that was probably one of the more fun events that we had at a really difficult point in time. People really liked the surprise of coming into the library and getting to see the cat. And of course, we have been revamping our Makers Lab lineup over the last 2 years. We have pivoted so that people can check out equipment that was previously only available for in-library use. We've also added new equipment and we've added new training materials to make it easier for people to learn how to use these pieces of equipment from home without having to come into the library. We also want you to join the fun. Chris, I hope I get some brownie points for doing this. Chris is a member of the Friends of the Irondequoit Public Library.
So it's Kathy and Terry and Carolyn, they're past president, so, yep, yeah.
We have a lot of friends.
Yes, we do.
But we could always use more. So if you're interested in helping to fundraise so that we can offset costs for some of these types of programs, or if you're just looking to emerge from a period of time where we were all cocooned up in our house and want to make some new friends for yourself, the Friends of the Library is always recruiting new members. So please speak with Chris after the program, or if you're watching from home, you can click on to irondequoitlibrary.org and send us a message and we'll get you information about how you can join the Friends. I should add, we're recording this presentation because I think the information that Greg put together was just so phenomenal when he gave Amy and I a preview. We want to have this archived for future reference. I think that this is the kind of presentation people will want to look at in 25 years or maybe in 75 more years. So if you're watching the archived version of this video 5 years from now on the web, our need for the Friends is probably still the same. And I encourage you to reach out through the ethers of time if you can, if we've invented that technology. If not, you can get in touch with a version of myself that is 5 years older, assuming I still have this job and I'm still here on this side of the soil. I'll be very happy to tell you about the Friends of the Library and our new holographic Friends program that I'm sure we'll have up and running in 5 years. Yeah, no pressure. So I want to thank all of you for coming out, all of you for watching. I want to thank Greg and Linda for caring enough about this community and this library to commit their words to paper and then to a screen and then to a video. I'm just so impressed with how much you guys care about this library. I just also wanted to speak to a few things that you had mentioned, Greg. Part of me still wishes we were called the Irondequoit Summer Library. I think that's a much more fun name. I'm assuming we would have summer weather all year round if we did that. We still have some of the signs that were on display at the Irondequoit Summer Library. One of them is at the end of the hall. The other is in a similar display case upstairs by the computer lab. So you can see the signs for yourself. We also have some of the founding documents that were referenced in the dates that Greg was speaking to, and a scrapbook that a former employee put together about the construction of this building. It has some really cool inside pictures that you won't get to see anywhere else. And then lastly, since you put me on the spot, I will explain the fascinating difference between a public library and an association library. Both look indistinguishable to the people who use them. In fact, if you've ever been to the Ogden Farmers Library, they are an association library. Their services and staffing models are basically identical to a public library. Where it's different is in the financing and the governance. So public libraries are a part of the town government that is governed by an independent library board. The employees of the library are town employees and we work for the town. We receive our budget through the municipal planning process that is very similar to the other town departments. An association library is the same in all of the services it provides and its staffing models. However, an association library is an independent organization, a nonprofit usually. Its sole purpose is to provide library services for the town that it contracts with. So the Irondequoit Farmers Library employees are employees of the Irondequoit Farmers Library and not of the town. The town negotiates with the library as a part of the budget process and gives them their budget. And then the association board has full control over those funds in a way that's very similar to the library board, but the process that they use to pay bills is slightly different. Fascinating.
Yeah.
I should have ended with the joke about contacting me 5 years. Better way to end a presentation. So thank you for coming. Thank you, Greg. I don't know if you anticipated taking any questions, but I'll make myself available if people have questions. And if not.
You know, maybe one more point to bring out. It's the Irondequoit Library, it's the Irondequoit Town Hall, it's the Irondequoit Police Department, it's East and West Irondequoit school districts. So often, I'm sure you get asked, are you on the East or West Irondequoit Library? We're all one library, one town, 2 school districts. There were 4, now there's 2.
Right.
Yes, yeah, that's for sure.